What we see in the crib is the most powerful learning machine in the universe. The tiny fingers and mouth are exploration devices that probe the alien world around them with more precision than any Mars rover. The crumpled ears take a buzz of incomprehensible noise and flawlessly turn it into meaningful language. It is truly a remarkable process. This was a quote by Alison Gopnik and Patricia Call, who are researchers I have followed for the last several decades. In their book, Scientists in a Crib, they lay out the beginning of understanding how this brilliant baby comes into this world hardwired and yet must rely on us to help the developmental process, to help finish the beautiful work that I believe our God laid upon us. Hello, and welcome to Talking Toddlers, where I share more than just tips and tricks on how to reduce tantrums or build your toddler's vocabulary. We're going to cover all of that, I assure you. But here, our goal is to develop clarity, because in this modern world, it's truly overwhelming, especially during these past 2 years. This podcast is about empowering moms to know the difference between fact and fiction, to never give up, to tap into everyday activities so your child stays on track. He's not falling behind, he's thriving through your guidance. We know that true learning starts at home, and Talking Toddlers, this podcast helps you develop that with clarity, confidence, and clear communication. So let's get started. Welcome back to Talking Toddlers. I'm Erin Heyer, your host, and in today's episode, I'm going to cover activities for healthy development. Do these things with your baby from day one to promote healthy development. And even though some of them might sound very, very pragmatic, very like, of course, I know this. I can't tell you how many parents over the years, 35 years in clinical practice, that they've come to me and said, I didn't know. If I knew, starting at day one or during pregnancy, how important all of these tiny little pieces of my everyday activities are meaningful and purposeful in a healthy development. So I think it's really, really important to recognize it's okay if you don't know what the heck you're doing, that your little one doesn't really understand, and he or she is just looking for you to love, protect, and guide. And I think sometimes we're overwhelmed. Well, not sometimes, we're often overwhelmed, especially with those newborns. Let's look at some basic facts. Newborns sleep approximately 16 to 18 hours per day. That means they're awake 6 to 8 hours. Most of that time is feeding and cleaning and kind of transitioning. And you are kind of stuck figuring out, what the heck do I do with this 2-week-old, 6-week-old, even a 3-month-old? They don't really have a lot to contribute at this point. And so many parents, and if this is you, I feel you, I hear you, I understand. What the heck do I do with a newborn? Yes, I can love on them, I can hold them, I can smell them, all those beautiful things, but 6 to 8 hours broken up throughout the day and into the night. Oh, how do I engage? And does it matter? Don't they just somewhere around 4 or 5 months, they start to have a more or bigger or robust personality, and then I can start? Nope. It starts on day one. It actually starts in utero. You and I talked about that and covered that, but it really, really does. But as soon as that baby is put in your arms, you can do any of these things that I'm going to lay out for you. So think about this. Babies are considered citizens of the world. And I've mentioned this to you before, but this is one of my mantras. They're wired for sound, which means any language. So your voice, your engagement is literally their life-saving tool. They're used to the native language mother's voice in utero, but communication for them, their ability to start to communicate with you starts initially with that unforgettable outburst of crying. You heard it on day one. You really looked for it moments, nanoseconds after delivery. But within those first few months, crying becomes much more directed and purposeful. And you, if you're in sync with your beautiful baby, then he or she will make different crying to communicate his or her needs. Pleasure, reassuring eye contact, communicating displeasure, uncomfort, sick, wet, tired, fussy, and you'll be able to kind of interpret these different verbal communication. That is where they're going with this. Because as they begin to watch your mouth and respond to your smiles and your chatter and your noises and your pitching and even your frustration, because it can come in without our knowing. They're trying to read us just as much as you are trying to read him or her. So in the beginning, there's that parentese, and there's a lot of, misunderstanding. It's more socially acceptable now, but the truth is what the science tells us. And, it really started in the late 1990s, early 2000s, really looking at how the brain learns to learn, how their native language or our native language is acquired with their everyday engagement and interactions with us. So parentese is instinctively when we talk differently to a baby, especially in those first, say, 3 months. And it's universal. It's gender and age blind, which means across all cultures, we hear this, male and female, as well as children. It's quite remarkable. If you have a newborn, couple of weeks old even, and you have a 2, 3, 4-year-old meet this newborn, they will adjust their verbal communication to this parentese, which is that higher pitch. We stretch the words out. We vary the tone. We don't really, make comprehensive sentences, but it's part of our human DNA. Kids, male, females, even strangers will do this when they meet your baby for the first time. They shift to our speech so babies can attend. They listen with intention because their lifeline, their coding, their hardwire system is finding that human voice. That is what's going to protect them. Their goal is to survive another day and hopefully be loved and comforted in that process. But what their auditory processing, it's a pathways, a cortex, that they're looking for contrast. They're looking for different pitches because they have to pull out spoken language from all this other noise that's coming at them. Even though the room might be technically quiet, or there's always noise in the background. And so they're following both the pitches, which are the contrast, and picking up on looking for patterns or looking for differences at the same time, and following the timing of our language. So if you listen to other languages across the world, there's a rhythm to it. It's musical, right? So that the timing of English is slightly different than Spanish, is slightly different than French, because of the way that the co-articulation, all of those muscles and movement patterns in our mouth have to move. But there's a rhythm to it. And And the baby, your baby, is trying to figure out what's the rhythm and what do I need to attend to make sense of all this verbal speech. So during those first 6 months, babies communicate initially with this quiet, pleasant cooing and the cry. Those are the kind of their two modes of communication. And then it's followed by prolonged vowels, and they begin to change their tone. They're playing with the vocal tract. They're trying to figure out it feels good inside my mouth and down in my throat, but how can I coordinate it? Just like they're trying to coordinate their arms and their hands and their feet and their legs, they're trying to coordinate their mouth and their jaw and their breathing mechanisms. So babies will then progress to babbling, which you guys are all aware of these terms, cooing and babbling, but there's purpose behind them. And that repetitive syllables, ba, 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 da, 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 ka, 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 ga, ga, ga. Some are voiced, some are voiceless. So all the vowels are voiced. That's when the vocal cords are turned on and there's a vibration in your throat. But then you have voiceless and voiced consonant sounds. But all of these babbling repetitive sounds are similar across cultures. And so it's a physiological, a developmental concept. And that's why we call your baby, my baby, citizens of the world. It means all babies make these same babbling sounds up until about 8 months of age, which then is that kind of magical moment or that they've had enough auditory stimulation, language spoken with them, that they can begin to really narrow the range of the sounds that are relevant to their native language. And so that's what we call pruning. And pruning is, a medical term. It's a developmental term where they have listened for patterns. They begin to sort things out and rules, right? What sounds are typically at the beginning of a word and typically at the end of a word. But they're finding through their listening with you and all of the other important adults and their older, brothers and sisters, they're really finding their linguistic code, because speech and language, whether it's English or German or French or whatever, there's a code to it and there are rules, and they have to be able to sort through them and make sense. It doesn't happen haphazardly. It doesn't happen, that there's a light switch and they just wake up at 12 months and start talking. You are so critical at wiring and developing these neural pathways every time you engage with your little one. It's pretty amazing when we think about between 18 months and 6 years of age, the average child, this is kind of in the low average range, acquire 9 to 10 words a day. So when you think about, a child having a couple of words at 18 months, hopefully they have 50 words at 2 years of age. By the time they're 6, they'll have close to 6,000 words. And so it's very, very important to understand that sometimes they've mapped and learned a single word through one encounter. So there's no way that we could ever teach each and every word. And so it's really, really important that through your everyday process, you understand how all of these, and and I've talked about this before, it's not in isolation. Speech and language isn't over here, and crawling is over here, and learning how to eat and chew is over there. No, it's a system, and it's a system within a system within a system within a system. The gross motor, the fine motor, and communication is this beautiful integrative system. So let me run through 10 top activities for you to do, because you're like looking at your newborn and saying, what do I do with you? But from birth to about 6 months of age. Because the time that you spend with your baby, whether you're feeding, changing, just rocking, all of it matters so, so much. And I know you hear this, but I really want you to understand some of the science behind it and some of the emotional need for your baby to build a healthy relationship with you. So then as the world begins to expand and they go outside of the immediate family and into the community, they'll do that with a strong foundation. So the number one activity, of course, coming from you know who, Talking Toddlers, is talking, right? It seems obvious, but I want you to be really honest with yourself. There are so many parents I've met over the years that really admit how uncomfortable or unsure of how to talk to a baby, to an infant, to a 1-month-old or even a 12-week-old. They just don't realize the importance that actually speaking with your baby is that foundation to building a lifelong processing system. When I talk about terms, or when I use terms like processing, think of it as this really integrative network that is so sophisticated, like the initial quote I started with Allison Gopnik and Patricia Colin Gopnik. The tiny fingers and mouth, that's where they're taking in the most information. Through their exploration as trial and error. And those ears, the way that they're shaped, is a God-given, beautiful design of how to really make sense of all of this buzz and noise and pick up that human voice, right? The other natural biological process is that when you are holding your newborn, whether you're breastfeeding or just cooing and rocking him or her in your arms, they have visual capability from birth about 8 inches, 8 to 10. And so that's their vision window. And it just so happens to be about the same distance from your breast, or you're rocking that cradle position and bottle feeding your baby, to your face. And so that's their whole universe. You, your mouth, your voice, your facial expressions, your eyes, your tone, all of it. It's you and your baby. And that's on purpose. That's to build that beautiful layer of really human connection. As I've said on here over and over again, and maybe it'll be on my tombstone, I don't know, but talk, talk, talk. And it's not like you're reading the dictionary to them, but you're using expressive language about your day, what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you feel about it. Even if you're feeling grumpy, you can tell them like, I'm having a grumpy day, grumpy, grumpy, grumpy. You know what that feels like. I know what that feels like. And sometimes you just gotta, complain. Talk to them. So the next thing that kind of goes hand in hand is reading books. Again, what I say to parents who say, I'm kind of uncomfortable just chatting away and sounding like a fool talking to my baby. Great, pick up a book. It's a script. It's ready and willing. And you don't have to think. If you're tired, pick up a book. If you're unsure, pick up a book. If you just need something to fill in the time, pick up a book. It goes side by side with just your verbal chatting about the day. So here, you have your script, you have your prop. Start with board books, of course, because that's just easier. The pictures are more simple. You can use the plastic ones in a bath. My daughter loved the books in the bath time. And that tactile, again, giving them a different sensory input at the same time with textures or subtle noises. They can be crinkly pages. They are physiologically putting together the voice, your voice, a sight of the book and maybe the pictures, and the feeling and the movement. What happens if I grab a hold of this page? But you're helping them wire their brains. They come to us underdeveloped or incomplete, and it is our job to help wire their brains. The next activity would be to sing. And I know many of you out there saying, my voice is hideous. I can't be singing. And truth be told, I once thought I had a decent voice, but by the time I had my daughter, no way. But I sang anyways because I sing almost daily in therapy. I take anything I say and put it into a tune. I make up lyrics. I do whatever because singing gives you the natural opportunity to play around with tones and your pitch changes. It also naturally elongates those vowels and helps the baby process, which means take in information, sort through it, see if it's relevant, fun, interesting, all of that. But the whole singing process or singing medium, it gives you opportunity to be playful, lighthearted, gives you that script, but it also helps the baby hear it over and over and over and over again. So they're building patterns. They begin to predict, and lo and behold, 12 months, 16 months, 18 months, 25 months, you stop singing and they fill in the blank. And it's a natural give and take, but it all begins from day one, right? You can hum it, you can sing it, you can change up the words. And then you're putting also your facial expressions, gestures, you're building routines, you're building that human connection, building neural pathways from neurons, right? What we say in neuroscience and in child development is neurons that fire together, wire together. And so you're building efficiency and processing speed, which then literally lays the foundation for understanding, and then builds engagement and participation. 1,000 different benefits from you singing off key over and over and over again. And that's important. And it's also important to understand that every culture has their nursery rhymes. Every single culture. It's part of our human development. So what also, number 4, goes along with this is making funny faces. And there's a thing called mirror neurons, just like it sounds, mirror, right, to reflect off. And so this will probably be an episode all on its own, but I look at it as God's given trait that we as babies and humans will spontaneously imitate through our mirror neurons. And mirror neurons came to light again in the late 90s, early 2000s. I was in the midst of my clinical practice. I just had my baby anyway, and it was just remarkable to understand how face-to-face or in the mirror, you can be looking in the mirror side by side, that when you smack your lips and then you wait, your baby at a few weeks of age will do the same. Now, do they know what they're doing? No. Are they doing it on purpose? No. It's a reflex. And that imitation, spontaneous imitation, again, helps them feel what it's like to close those lips and smack them open. They're getting feedback, and that's reinforced. And then you do it again, and he does it again. Or if you stick out your tongue and then wait, they'll stick out their tongue. And some research, even though there's other around the whole yawning. Like if I yawn, you'll yawn. But it does seem to stem from this whole mirror neurons, which is a band of neurons. If you look at the frontal lobe, where your forehead is, that's the action, right? The doing part of the brain. And it's a band in your cortex right behind that where the mirror neurons kind of rest. If you even elongate vowels, ooh, ah, and you have, again, contrast, so your lips are tight and then your mouth is open, they will, through the sound patterns and the movement, will imitate spontaneously. It's a reflex, but they really, really love it. And again, you're snatching a few minutes here and a few minutes there, and you're building that human connection with them. These are all the things that you do with a baby that are critical to their health and well-being. Talk, read books, sing songs, make funny faces. It's not that complicated, but it is so incredibly imperative that you understand the weight and the beauty behind all of this. The key with the whole funny faces and the mirror neurons is that it brings you to being present, to making a noise or a funny face, and then wait and give your baby time to feel that connection. And whether you're face to face or you're side by side looking in a mirror, because again, they see that human image, they see themselves, they see you. It's all making more and more sense with every interaction. And these are short time frames from several seconds to a minute or two. Shortly after you feed them or change them, or you sit down and you think, oh, I can have a cup of tea. He's relaxed. It might only last for a couple of minutes, but take full advantage of you resting and having him or her in your arms, and that you're making some funny faces like, what the heck do? I don't want to get up and get that book over there because I'll disrupt this moment. Make some funny faces. Number 5, tummy time. And this is a big one. I've mentioned it before. And I know, occupational therapists and physical therapists and chiropractors, and we all talk about it. And how it's related to speech and language is, again, there's such a big component of verbal communication that is physical. But it also builds, remember the networks and networks inside of networks inside of networks. And so it's all interrelated. And I think most parents, because you don't know what we don't know, that is much bigger than you realize. It's not like you carve out, oh, we're going to do tummy time, in the morning at 10 o'clock, and then we're going to do it again in the afternoon at 3:15. No. It has to be sprinkled throughout your day, because it really does. Again, I think, and I'm just kind of putting these two and two pieces together. I think the human voice and your verbal communication with them, your chatter and your purpose behind that, and tummy time are probably the two most important things you can provide in those first 6 months. And so it should start day one. And if you have been kind of doing it as piecemeal, that's okay. Wherever you are, go back and really invest your knowledge now, right? And that anytime they're awake is opportunity for tummy time. And I'm going to lay out several different scenarios that you can use. So the classic that I think, pediatricians tell you, or the books tell you, is, you put the baby on the floor and perhaps you roll up a little towel and they can kind of, be propped up a skosh. And as soon as the baby starts to get fussy or cry or starts to complain and it's really uncomfortable and all your hormones go, run amok and you feel bad, it literally hurts you to see your baby in discomfort, you stop. That's the classic scenario. And that's what we carve out those, okay, we're going to do tummy time, between, 8 o'clock and 8:15. That's okay. You can do that, but you can also do it with them, right? You can lie down on the floor with them and face to face with your little one. That makes that human connection. That's when you can pull in your funny faces and making funny noises and get their attention. And what you're doing is you're building their interest, and at the same time, you're distracting from the discomfort that we're going through. It's sort of like if you're working out in the gym and, you have 3 more reps and your coach, your trainer is like yelling at you, you can do it, come on, you can do it, 1 more, right? You're being distracted. You're not feeling the discomfort as much. Yes, it's still uncomfortable, but you're pushing literally through it. And so your baby will, push up a bit on his forearms out of like desperateness, and then strengthen those muscles. Every time we have some kind of resistance training, right? Pushing against the wall. You can do, if you're really out of shape, you can do push-ups against the wall, or you can do what we say, quote unquote, girl push-ups or knee push-ups, right? And you're taking these measurable progressive steps. And that's what your baby's doing when they're on their tummy, and especially on the floor, right? Because that's a really hard surface. Hopefully there's a soft blanket or whatever, but you can also hold on to their bum to stabilize, again, helping them find and feel their body in space to give them some grounding. And so that when they do push up, it's a little bit easier. Help them along, guide them along. Don't feel like it's, they'll figure it out. You, mom and dad, are pivotal in helping them figure it out. Okay, another way that I have loved over the years, and they've gotten more and more elaborate, but is a baby mirror, right? A tummy time mirror where it's, the baby is on a special blanket, and they have toys and different textures and crinkling noises, again, bringing the visual, the auditory, and the tactile together. Plus, they get to look at themselves in the mirror. They don't know it's themselves. They don't have that cognitive ability yet, but they love looking at faces, even theirs, right? And so we are wired to gravitate toward other human faces. It's part of that self-preservation, that survival, right? To look for people like us in our quote unquote tribe. Also, the toys that I mentioned on the mat is very engaging. What you're doing is distracting them. You're building their interest. You're building their engagement. And it builds the length of time that they're able to tolerate that experience of tummy time. At the same time that when they push away and maybe they crinkle something on that blanket that's attached to the mirror, then that distracts them for a few more seconds. And they're like, oh, what's that sound? Oh, I'm going to push up again. I'm going to push up. That whole cause and effect. If I move my arm like this, oh, there's a noise, or that thing flips over. It could be some kind of ring or something. And it's like, whoa, that startled. That changed my visual field. And I'm going to do it again. And you're building a few seconds of tummy time. And that's what you start in the beginning, and up to a minute, up to 2 minutes. And why is this all important? Because all of this builds not only their physiological strength, to push up, because ultimately we want them to crawl and then to walk, but also the motor and the torso strength for inhalation and exhalation, which is the foundation to speech and language. It also helps when you then transition them into the high chair, and that's good for talking. It's good for eating and baby-led weaning and all of these beautiful, beautiful developmental milestones. But it all starts with tummy time. So you could also just distract them with a toy. Here's another, avenue through this whole tummy time process. Distract them, engage them, building and expanding upon those initial seconds to tolerate this uncomfortable position, and giving them longer and longer opportunities to strengthen that neck, the shoulders, the arms, the back, the torso, and we want them to be able to gain that strength in the neck so they can move their head as they're looking and expand their visual field. So around the 3 months, and you'll hear when I run through all of these things, that the 3 month is kind of this big shift, give or take, right? None of these milestones or age are written in stone. That is 3 months and 2 days. There's wiggle room because we all have different experiences. But somewhere around that 3rd month, they can hold themselves up with their arms in line with their shoulders. And that's important, right? That they have, think of, I don't know, most of you have at least seen in yoga, if you haven't experienced it, like, cobra posture, right? Where you're on your belly, if you hold their bum down, so you're stabilizing the lower half of their body, and then they can gain stability and rotate, strengthen their back and their neck, and hold themselves up on their forearms in alignment with their shoulders. And it's all purposeful, right? Because they've gained strength and coordination. So some additional tummy time techniques could be on your chest, especially in that first month or 6 weeks and 8 weeks or whenever. I think a baby on your chest, I know it's very popular to have dads do it on their chest and have that skin to skin, that beautiful connection. But, you can prop yourself up on the couch or the bed with big pillows. And the higher you are propped up, then the easier it is for a baby. So if a baby's really fussing with it, then, sit up a little bit higher. But it's giving them, again, that opportunity for face-to-face engagement. Distract them a little bit with your funny noise making, reinforce it, strengthen it, do it for a couple of seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and then change their posture, and then come back a couple of minutes later and do it again. Every waking opportunity to weave this into your natural flow of your day interaction is building strength and coordination. The other technique could be a football hold. Again, that was pretty popular in my family, but it gives them a different angle of being held and supported. And so they're not necessarily pushing against anything. They're resting on the back of your forearm, like holding a football, but they are holding their head up. And one of the reasons why they'll do that and try something that's quote unquote uncomfortable is because you've given them a different visual field, and it's interesting to them. It's different. The novelty really sparks their interest. You could then stand in front of a big long mirror. And again, building another 30 seconds of looking up is like, wow, I see this baby. I don't know it's me, but it's quite beautiful. And I see mama, and it's like, wow, this is a whole different experience. Building time and adding those times together is cumulative when you look throughout their whole day. Every short burst of time builds up into the next moment. Again, think about, if you're training for your first 5K or 10K and you start by walking, right? And then you start by jogging. And, there's science now behind, marathon runners who run and walk and run and walk, and they actually physically feel stronger and healthier at the end with this combination. So think of it that way. Or, if you work out with weights or you work out in the yoga room, whatever it is, when we're building strength and coordination, if you give these little segments and then slowly but surely expand upon them, they'll all add up together. So just keep in mind, this is really, really important, this whole tummy time. And you can be talking to them, you can be singing, you can be showing them different, environments. But every time your baby is awake, right? Those 8 hours a day, 6 to 8 hours, depending on their sleep cycle, that you're building the physical foundation for gross motor, fine motor, and human communication. All right, so number 6 would be a baby gym. Again, pretty classic. And you're saying to yourself, duh, I know that, Erin. But I have to admit, when I was a new mom and I'd been a therapist for 10 plus years, I didn't really think it was a big deal, this whole baby gym. It was just another, toy device. But it should be really a prominent thing that you have in those first 3 months, because it frees up your hands, of course, and gives the baby some independence. So you're separated. He or she can continue to see you if you're, working around the room. They can hear you, they can connect with you, but they're also free, their arms and legs. And in the beginning, they're just going to kind of bat it, right? The toys that are hanging on. I'm pretty sure all of you know what a baby gym is. And they're not that expensive, $30, $40. You don't have to get a big elaborate one, but just enough to give you 10 minutes of respite, but also building their independence and separation from you. In the beginning, babies will focus on an item and follow if it swings in front of them with their visual tracking. They, again, because they haven't had enough tummy time yet, they don't have the strength to rotate their neck and turn their head and track that way. So you have to keep it in that 8, 10, 12-inch sphere because that's their visual field. But you're building that visual training where, something colorful is hanging and I'm going to follow it, as it wiggles back and forth. You're also separating that something that's close in their visual field from something far away, like you, for example. And so if they shift because they hear your voice, then they will be able to adjust their visual gaze through movements of their eyes in those first 3 months. They haven't really coordinated moving their head yet. But once they start grabbing things with their full fist, somewhere around 3 months, then they've pruned and integrated enough neurons and they're firing in those clearer pathways, and that this is where real learning begins. So somewhere around that 3rd month, they've had enough life experience with you that they have neurons that are firing together and wired together, and those laying that, think of it as like railroads, right? But it's like speed among speed, right? So now number 7 would be toys. Again, you're like saying, duh, Erin, but I'm giving you 10 things that you can use, activities with and without toys or objects, that you spend those waking hours. You don't need a lot of toys, a handful, right? Remember, you can rotate these out. Your baby everything is new to them. I just list a couple of obvious but critical. Have a lightweight rattle. In the beginning, again, they don't have a really good grasp, right? And so but as they begin to purposefully hold on to things, it needs to be lightweight. So they as they're building their arm strength and their coordination. Texture books, like I mentioned, that have no lights, no batteries. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, crinkly pages or fuzzy, if it's a fuzzy bear or, bumps on the leopard or those kinds of things. The other first best baby toy is called an O-ball, O-B-A-L-L. It's, a little sphere about 4 inches in diameter, and it's, with these holes so the babies can grip a hold of it. They can squish it a little bit. It can be rolled. They can mouth it. So in the very beginning, they don't realize, and it's very, very lightweight. So, but they naturally will grab a hold of it and then it'll fall away. Or by accident, they'll switch from hand to hand and that's their life experience. And they're like, oh, wow, if I, cross midline here, then I have another hand over here that I think is attached to me. Let me try that again. It's a lot of trial and error, a lot of accidents. Then you reinforce it. It feels good. But those kinds of very small toys, again, you can play with that thing for 5 minutes. It all adds up. Another cute little toy that I think is nice is one of those rainmakers. Again, no batteries, but it's noisy. They have the visual when you flip it. Not necessarily a big one. 12, 14, 16 inches is fine. They have good colors. It's a nice auditory sound. And then when all the little beads go down to the bottom, it stops. And you can hear the pause. And then flip it over again. And it's fascinating to kids. Again, looking for patterns, looking to attend to something specific. That's what you're building. You want a kid when he's 4 and 5 and 6 and 14 and 18 to have good attention. It starts now. So your wiring, I want to kind of mention here the myth about black and white toys, just for, we're talking about toys here. Babies, newborns, they see in color. What the toy company kind of jumped on was that the science helped us understand that it's really contrast. And so you don't want just white walls, or you don't just want, all beige toys. You want contrast. And so color, yellow and green are contrast, right? So the black and white is the biggest contrast that one can have. So don't fall for that. That's just a myth. So what you're doing with these toys, you're wiring the visual processing system, as well as the auditory system with the parentees as you're talking with them, and that not babyish, made up vocabulary, but you're elongating, you're sing-song, you're really helping them build auditory attention. And you're coding the systems, right? So they first will begin to focus on the color, the contrast. Then they'll be able, through their tactile experience, figure out the shape. Oh, this is round versus this is flat, right? They'll feel the outline, the contours, and the boundaries. And then they'll track with the eyes. If you roll that ball, can they begin to, follow it with their eyes. And as they strengthen through more and more and more and more and more tummy time opportunities, then they'll be able to track by turning their head. And again, at somewhere around 3 months. Think of that they, in the beginning, they'll hit the toys in their baby gym that's above them. And then that full grasp with a fist will with purpose will begin to emerge around that 3rd month too. So a note to that, up to those first, up to that 3-month mark, they do have what we call a grasp reflex. So they'll, if you put your finger or your thumb in their palm and they'll grasp it and they won't be able to let go on purpose, right? They can't volitionally let go. And so they'll grab your finger and hold on, and it'll be like, oh my gosh, this is like for dear life. Or your hair, if you have long hair, moms, I do. Or your skin. Sometimes they grab a hold of your skin or their own skin, and they're not putting 2 and 2 together like, oh my gosh, I'm ripping my skin apart, or your clothing, right? But it's a reflex. It's a grasp reflex. But if you gently bend their wrist downwards, your wrist only goes up and down, right? But if you gently bend their wrist down, then their fingers will open up naturally and they'll let go of that death grip on your hair or skin or clothes or whatever. So those first 3 months, their survival is a lot through their reflexes, right? Their reflex to smack their lips when they see you. And the reflex is if you put something in the palm of their hand, they're going to grab a hold on to it. So number 8 is one of my favorites, which was bath time. And but it didn't become my favorite right off the starting gate. I had to learn a few tricks, and trust me, there were several nightmares where everybody ended up crying. And I think we have a video that I've never had courage to go back and watch. But some of the tricks are use a subdued light. Bathroom, if you're bathing your baby at the sink in the bathroom, those lights can be atrocious. So have a couple of night lights, maybe on the vanities. I remember having a big, long vanity mirror right on top. And so having that mirror in front of her was very, very helpful because she entertained herself. Also, to use a warm, wet washcloth on her belly when she's exposed like that, right? It's cold. It's she doesn't really understand the whole nakedness, but it's like, oh my gosh, the air is cold, so warm up the room, dim the lights, and use a warm washcloth on her belly, because not only is it warm, but it's wet. And so it grounds them, again, helping them stabilize that torso. Because developmentally, that's, their torso becomes stabilized, and then they can practice moving their limbs with purpose. And then they can stabilize their limbs and then move their feet or their hands with purpose. But it can be very, very dysregulating and very unnerving for your baby to be, wet and cold, or even you talking to them is puffing air on their fragile little skin. So the more that we can provide stability, some order, some flow, use your nice voice, soft, warm hands, the warm, sudsy soap, movement, the better they're able to wire their neurological system, their sensory systems. And I think, bath time is a great opportunity to build a beautiful evening routine. There's communication, there's a lot of affection, there's presence, and really help them with that connection with you and transitioning to sleep and all of those beautiful, beautiful opportunities. But this is a great time to not get riled up. And I've had, some serious conversations with parents to use it more to transition down, to be engaging, right? You talk to them, you sing, you can make funny faces in the mirror, but don't rev it up. And dads sometimes can be the instigator at that point in the evening. So these suggestions can be integrated after bath. Take a few moments to have your baby rest on your chest. Again, more tummy time in that inclined position if they're too tired to lift their heads. But you can communicate, You can sing a nice nursery rhyme. You can make it up. They don't care if you're off tune. They really just love being in your presence. Okay, number 9, for all of these activities, if you ever really laying that foundation, those first 3 months to a healthy, robust, integrated, happy developmental process. Number 9 would be a change of scenery. And I put this in here because there's an actual thing that's called the witching hour. And I'm going to have a episode on its own. But that's because the witching hour can be a freaking nightmare for sure. And I can tell you stories that our witching hour lasted for, I don't know, I'd say 4 to 5 weeks, but it's that time when an otherwise content baby, which our baby was, Moira, thank you very much, but all of a sudden becomes extremely fussy, like for no reason. They're dry, they're fed. I've spent some time with them, it's quality time. But it typically occurs daily, and it starts around 4 or 5 p.m., can last until 10 or 11. It can last for a few minutes every day or a couple of hours. And most babies, that witching hour can occur somewhere around 2, 3, 4 weeks. And it generally peaks around 6 to 8 weeks of age, but sometimes it can last up till 3 or 4 months. And I think sometimes it gets mixed up with the whole term of colicky baby. And so there's a lot of confusion. And so I just want to put it out there that this whole witching hour dread and nightmare is part of the developmental process. They're really, once they've come out of your womb, which is like the perfect universe, and then they've tolerated, the first couple of weeks, like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to die immediately. I'll figure this out. And then it seems like they just can't pull it together. So I'm just putting it out there that perhaps just start to notice some of these patterns and be prepared. Know that it's typical. Know that it's healthy. Know that most families, most moms, it rips us apart. And, but it is a very natural developmental period. And so when I talk about an activity such as a change of scenery, that's the time to do it. And so what I mean by change of scenery means go outside. Don't turn on the screen, please, 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 please. No, that's a whole different nightmare. But no, go outside. And I know it depends on your location, the season, the weather, all of this. But if you can, in that late afternoon, and this is going to be another whole episode about outdoor play and outdoor exposure and sunlight and nature and all of this. But for this witching hour, so, the sunlight really, really is critical to a healthy human being development and lifelong, experience. But the sunlight will help you and your baby with melatonin and the circadian rhythm, especially in the late evening or late afternoon. It gives you vitamin D, and we'll talk about that. And so in the early morning and the late afternoon, sunrise and sunsetting windows, the UV is decreasing, and there's an infrared light that's healing to mostly you, but your baby needs it too. So if you can expose your baby to sunlight for about 10, 15 minutes you can do it in the morning and in the evening, but I'm talking, how to apply it during those witching hours, but, between 4 and 6 p.m., to draw the maximum benefit. So, keep in mind it's like an hour after sunrise and an hour prior to sunset is considered the best time to expose your baby to the sunlight. And it doesn't mean like full-fledged. You can put them on if you have a patio, if you can't go outside, a little patio and you have some foliage, right, to cover. But since your baby's skin is very sensitive, as you know, exposure to full sunlight should never be, more than 30 minutes, max. And I will talk about all the benefits about sunlight and nature and all of that. But this is a great opportunity to just go outside. You have the sunlight benefits, but you also have a change of the visual processing and the auditory, right? So you have changes of lights, which are interesting to your baby, the clouds, the leaves. Maybe there's a light airflow or a little breeze on their skin. It wakes them up and calms them. There's sounds, whether it's birds or even cars rolling by. It's different experience. And I'm not saying take them to the grocery store. I'm not even saying take them to the park. I'm saying, go on your patio, go on your back, go on your front porch, go on, a little grassy area next door. The baby can sit in a bouncer or in a little baby carrier on you, again, giving them exposure to the outside, but they still feel you. They're connected to your heartbeat. They feel your warmth. And both of you can be more centered and more grounding and helping through that witching hour. But a change of scenery is a great opportunity. 10 minutes. That's it. You can just hum. You don't have to sing. You don't even have to say anything. Because there's enough sensory information coming toward your baby's system that they're grounded. Or they're feeling better because they're not indoors and there's not, you're not trying to force them to calm down. You can also put them, on a blanket in the grass and let them just be in the moment, right? Okay, so number 10 of this list of 10 activities is really not necessarily a physical activity other than a check-in with being realistic and a mindset shift of setting realistic expectations with yourself, your baby, your partner, your family, your life, especially those first 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. I used to joke that if, you make it through that first year without going insane, then you're a hero. But I think if you make it, through the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, every time you need a hero badge. But, there are some sayings that this too shall pass, and that's true. But I think it's also very, very important that new moms, new families, come prepared with as much knowledge as they can. And there's so much on-the-job learning, but at the same time, there's just an overwhelming amount of information out there that is conflicting and bizarre on some cases and dismissive on other cases. So I'm trying to give you more focus, more clarity that yes, the moments do pass quickly. And, your beautiful baby comes with no manual, as you know, highly incomplete, dependent 1,000% upon you. But you also have it in you to know what to do. Sometimes we have to shush that inner voice, that critical voice, and just be present, right? Be patient. It is a process, and it's by no means linear. There are ups and downs, moment by moment, trial and error. The learning curve is so bloody steep at times that, I know that you question your bandwidth, your energy, your ability over and over and over again. And all moms do this. And I'm here to share with you that the more you know of what's typical, even if it's hell, like that witching hour, that you will navigate through this. And so here's this, I will just end today on this side story. I I had my baby, later. I was 39 when I had Moira. And even with all my training, I was very aware of the witching hour, but it still knocked me down hard. And my dear, dear husband, Chris, he's a very proud, capable, lovely human being. He's ex-Navy, he's stoic. As I said, he's strong and committed, and he will muster it up and, be there. But I'll never forget when we were, Moira was probably, 6, 8, 10 weeks old. But after several long, long nights and early mornings and, those witching hours went by where we couldn't really console her. There's no amount of rocking or bouncing or singing that was satisfying. But he said to me one night or one early morning, he's like, gosh, I now know why they use sleep deprivation on POWs, those prisoners of war. Just, you'll almost do anything just to rest, just to put your head down on the pillow and sleep. And he wasn't kidding. Our baby, I have to say she was an easy baby for the most part, but these several weeks were hell. And it hit us. And even though intellectually I felt like I was aware and prepared, emotionally, I was not. And until you go through it, you don't know. And here, I'm here to say that you don't know what you don't know. So I'm trying to set the stage that so much of it is typical and healthy, but to ask a question and to seek guidance. So back to, the purpose of today was really looking at activities that you can do on a daily basis to really promote and build a solid foundation for healthy development. So you don't have to guess, you don't have to worry, you don't have to figure it out on your own. Babies do come to us with remarkable skill. But it's only the hardwired system, and that you and I need to give them the opportunities, give them those experiences to build the fluidity, the automaticity, the ease, the flow, so they begin to interface with this world step by step by step in an integrative process. And there are many, many variables involved. You know this, I know this, and I'm here to help guide through that. So thanks again for sharing your precious, precious time. And if you're finding benefit, please share with your friends and family any and all of these episodes. Don't forget to subscribe. You don't want to miss any exciting ones that I have coming up every Tuesday. Also, please take a minute and leave an honest review and help me understand what your questions are, your needs. At the same time that you can help, the algorithm and the Apple Podcast reach other people. Help me extend my reach, connect with new moms. And as you know, my mission is to reach 10,000 new moms just like you in this beautiful new year, right? 2023. I'm ready to take charge. I'm ready to do it with you. I know you want it to, and your little one is just going to thrive because you are in the driver's seat. All right. God bless. Take care. See you next week.